right, I think we may have saved the best for last when it comes to the battlefield Resaca. That's where we are. You're with the American Battlefield Trust. That's Chris White behind the camera. I'm Gary Edelman. We have our standard bevy of guests as usual, and we're going to wrap things up here at Resaca. By way of reminder, we've already brought first a little bit of then all of Sherman's army here, basically. We've got Joe Johnston's army here. We've talked about what happened on May 14th, where the Union launches costly attacks across. We talked about the emboldened Confederates launching their own attack, which also goes miserably. And here we are on the 15th, where we really need to summarize that fighting. And here we are. We were here before in the middle of the battlefield. We went up to the Confederate Battery. Now we've moved along the Confederate line to a protruding battery that is over here with a very cool name, with two cool names as a matter of fact, on American Battlefield Trust land that you're looking at off in the distance here. Let's set up this 15th fighting and talk to Will Greene.
Hey, thanks, Gary. Yes, we are standing at a very important point on the last day of the Battle of Resaca, which is May the 15th. And let's set the stage. We've already seen that Sherman's plan was to outflank the Confederate position here by crossing the Oostenaula River downstream from Resaca and putting a force on the other side of the river. That plan went a little bit awry on the 14th because the Federals that had crossed the river were concerned that they might get cut off. But by the morning of the 15th, Sherman was convinced that this was the right strategy. He would send McPherson's entire Army of the Tennessee across these pontoon bridges at Lay's Ferry. And in typical, this is sounding like Sherman has a pattern in his attacks here in the Atlanta campaign, I think you'd be onto something, because he's going to launch more of these diversionary attacks in order to pin Johnston in position while McPherson goes across the river and renders the Confederate position moot. So, on the morning of the 15th, Johnston is also thinking offensively. He has been informed that the Yankees had left the south side of the river, and therefore he thought, hey, Mr. Hood, maybe we should attack, try to get around the Yankee left flank and cut them off from their supply line leading back to Chattanooga. But before he could do that, the Union forces, particularly Joe Hooker's 20th Corps, will launch their diversionary attacks here on the north side of the battlefield. Our last stop, we were talking about Union attacks coming from west to east. Here we're talking about Union attacks coming from north to south. And the position we're standing at was defended by the Cherokee, Georgia artillery under a European fellow named Max Vandenkorpen. And you can see very clearly the remains of this battery, all the embrasure sites out here, 4 Napoleons in Vandenkorpen's battery. Now they were located actually in front of the Confederate infantry position. Off to my right, where you see these houses here, on that ridgeline is where John Brown's Tennessee Brigade was located in support of the advanced battery position. Why would you put artillery out here in front of the infantry? Because of the terrain. An artillery battery back on the ridgeline would give a potential attacker too much defilade, too much protection. But by putting Vandenkorpen's battery here at the edge of this very steep declivity, it eliminated the defilade, all but eliminated the defilade for a Union attack. And those Union attacks would begin about noon. Now, Sherman wanted them to start about 8 o'clock. There was quite a bit of dysfunction that morning in getting these 6 Union brigades aligned to make these diversionary attacks. But finally, about noon, Hooker begins to make his assault. And in our position where we are right now, the attackers were William Ward's brigade, including the 70th Indiana, whose colonel was Benjamin Harrison, future President Benjamin Harrison. And they made these assaults up this very steep climb and were able, by taking significant casualties, were able to drive away the supports from this artillery and eventually have a hand-to-hand combat with the artillerists here in Vandenkorpen's battery. That went the way as you might expect it to go, in favor of the Union infantry. Those battery survivors retreated back to the Confederate line, and those Confederates, Brown's Tennesseans, begin firing down on the Yankees, who are down below the ridge line in the occupied battery here at Vandenkorpen's position. Consequently, those attacks were so severe that Harrison and the 33rd New Jersey were the 2 regiments that came up here. had to retreat back to the base of the hill. Now, in the meantime, Johnston is thinking, all right, we've defeated these assaults, maybe we should make our attack. And late in the afternoon, he launches a division-wide attack against the Federals, losing about 1,000 men in the process, another sort of wasted assault by the Confederates. But by sunset, Johnston is well aware now that the Federals have indeed crossed the Oostenaula River beyond his left flank, and if he stays at Resaca, he's going to be cut off from his supply line. And consequently, Johnston will order a retreat that night to get across the river and get out of the Resaca position. And he will execute that retreat very flawlessly. He will get his men across, and they will be heading down towards Calhoun, and eventually their next stop at Adairsville, Georgia. In the meantime, it is dark here. And these 4 guns, these 4 Napoleons of the Cherokee artillery, are sitting here as wonderful prizes for whoever could take them. And the Federals decide, hey, John White Geary, the Union division commander here, turns to one of his brigade commanders, George Cobham, and says, hey, Cobham, let's go get those guns. And so Cobham assigns the 5th Ohio Infantry to move up in the darkness towards this position and to begin, oh my gosh, there they are. The Buckeyes from the 5th Ohio are coming up to the battery, and they are actually going to be digging through the lunette here, which was unoccupied. They brought ropes with them to attach to the carriages of the guns, and they took 2 of those guns and dragged them down to this ravine and in safety. But still 2 guns remain. And so Cobham says, all right, we need more help. He sends up the 5th Ohio again and the 33rd New Jersey. They come up and take away the remaining 2 guns in a remarkable example of ingenuity on the Federal side. Of course, after the war, the men involved in this made a huge deal. The commander of the 5th Ohio made a career out of bragging about getting these guns. What they didn't really mention is all the Confederate infantry had already departed in their evacuation, so it maybe wasn't quite as bold as they thought it was. But still, it was a remarkable achievement. And in the morning, the Confederates are gone. Sherman has occupied now the Resaca lines, and the Atlanta campaign will continue. The Battle of Resaca, which begins really on the 13th of May and concludes here on the 15th of May, is a bloody affair. Sherman will lose some 4,000 troops in the assaults here at Resaca, and Johnston will lose almost as many, about 3,800. You can debate yourself as to who was the best general here. I don't think either commander necessarily distinguishes himself at Resaca. It's a much more bloody stop than Rocky Face Ridge was, and from here the armies are going to move on in this red clay minuet, as Shelby Foote called it, the Atlanta campaign, and you'll be enjoying more of these videos with Gary and Chris as the campaign unfolds.
All right, this is just great. Will, good friend of ours, I have one more thing for you. One of the original 7 founders of the organization that created the American Battlefield Trust. In Will Greene's living room was formed everything that we have been able to do together with your help. So I want to thank you for that. And since Will is departing right now, I think I hear some clapping going on off camera there. Because Will's going to be departing, I thought we could take the opportunity really to ask you maybe a little bit more about the Army of Tennessee and facing Sherman here. So we're going to be going off, trying to continue with the Union outflanking and moving around Johnston, getting sick of that and attacking him. But, did whether it be Johnston or Hood, did they have a chance? Did that matter, the command? Could they have, prevented the loss of Atlanta?
I wish we had talked about this before, because I don't really have a good answer for that. There have been plenty of historians who have written about the Atlanta campaign. There's some very critical accounts of Johnston's behavior. There's been some more favorable accounts. There are places in the Atlanta campaign that clearly Johnston could have done some technical things and some tactical things that would have made a difference, but I'm not really sure. I mean, Sherman had a good plan. He outnumbered the Confederates here. He had an idea of avoiding major frontal assaults, and I'm not sure that anybody could have done all that much better than Joe Johnston. But I emphasize, I'm not really sure. I've been studying the Civil War for more than 50 years, and I got to say that Joe Johnston is the one person that I can't get a handle on. So thanks for making me look bad, Gary.
I'm so glad I asked. I also violated my rule in sort of asking a what-if question, which I despise myself, but I'm going to be forced to address myself later this year. Will, for everything you've done for us on this trip, on our previous swing to Petersburg, and for the trust, we really appreciate it. Thanks to Chris behind the camera. I'm already starting to get texts about best lead actor in the Cherokee Battery removal from Chris Makowski. And thank you all for watching and for supporting Battlefield preservation, education, and our battlefield contrivances.